Hey, it's Meredith here, and are you confused about the manual settings on your Canon DSLR camera? Well, a few videos ago, I walked you through my YouTube studio setup here in my home, and today I'm going to show you the DSLR video settings that I use on my Canon camera. Now, I use a Canon 70D. It's a few years old, but it's a great camera, and this should apply to the updated versions too, the 80D and 90D, but I don't have those, so I can't tell you for sure. Now, I got this question from my friend Lindsay Hazel over on Instagram. She mentioned that she has a Canon 70D, but the manual settings are a little bit confusing, and so she usually just uses her phone or her webcam to create her YouTube videos. And I was like, girl, if you have such a great camera, you can really use that to level up the quality of your videos with that DSLR. The secret is to use your Canon 70D in manual mode, and it's really easy to become overwhelmed with all of the settings on your DSLR in manual mode, but I'm going to keep it really simple for you in this video so that once you nail the settings for the space that you're normally recording in, if you have a studio or a home office like I do, then you pretty much can just turn your camera on, hit record, and you're ready to go. Or two, you'll understand what settings to tweak, just those minor tweaks, if your shooting environment changes. And if learning DSLR video settings in manual mode and creating YouTube videos or social media videos is your jam, like mine, then hit that subscribe button and let's dig right in. Now, there are two ways that you can look at and adjust the settings on your camera. One is on the camera itself, which I'm going to show you in this video, and two is using Canon's EOS utility app on your computer. But I'm going to save that for another video. I will let you know when it gets published, and I'll put a link down in the description to that as well. But we're going to dive into the settings that I use, why I use them, and what they mean for your Canon DSLR in manual mode. And I also have a really great hack for how to prevent your battery life from draining when you are shooting your YouTube videos. First, I'm going to turn my camera on, and you can see that I'm in video mode, and this is where you can toggle between photo and video. So I can see what I'm shooting here on the LCD monitor, and as we change our settings, we can see the effects in real time here on this monitor. And I'm going to put the camera in manual mode, so using the mode dial on top, press the lock release button in the middle and turn this dial so that the M is selected. And before we get into the settings on the monitor though, let's go into the menu and go to the second video settings tab and tap movie rec size, movie recording size. I keep mine at 1920/30 all I, which means I'm shooting 1080. So it's 1920 by 1080 resolution. That's the highest resolution I have on the 70D, and my frame rate is 30, and the all I refers to the compression. I find these settings to be just fine. So I'm gonna hit that menu button again, and now we can change the actual shooting settings. You can use the LCD screen and buttons here on the top, or the LCD monitor on the back, which is a touch screen. So for shooting videos, I tend to use that touchscreen monitor to change my settings because my camera is usually facing me, and then the screen flips out and it's also facing me. So looking at the monitor, we can see a few different settings and numbers here. If you don't see any settings on your monitor, or if it just looks different, hit that info button above the monitor and press it a few times to filter through the different options until you see something like what I'm seeing here. And on the bottom left, you'll see servo AF, which means that when you're shooting a video, the autofocus will continue to focus on the subject as that subject moves around in the frame. That little green light is on, so that means that this is enabled. The next setting over is the camera's shutter speed. Now remember, we're in manual mode here, so we need to actually tell the camera what we want our shutter speed to be, what we want our aperture to be, and what we want our ISO to be. And the shutter speed is easy when you're shooting a video. It should be double the frame rate. So I'm shooting 30 frames per second. My shutter speed is set to 60. And as long as I'm shooting videos, not photos, I can leave it there and never touch it again. The next setting over is aperture, and the aperture refers to how big or small the opening of the lens is, which controls the amount of light that's coming in. And this is also the setting that helps you create kind of a blurred background or bokeh effect. But before we play around with the aperture, we need to talk about ISO or ISO first. So the ISO refers to how sensitive your camera is to the light that's coming in to it. And this is where different lighting situations are going to come into play here. So I could give you my ISO settings, which I will, but it's not really going to make that big of a difference to you because your lighting situation and where you're recording is going to be totally different. So generally speaking, you want your ISO to be as low as you can get it to create the best possible image quality in your videos. This is one of the reasons why having decent lighting is so important with videos, because the more light that you have coming in, the more detail your camera can pick up, and then it doesn't have to work so hard to create that image. So let me show you what I mean. If I turn my lights off, which I have a handy little button down here, then it's pretty dark in here, and I can raise my ISO up a little bit. I should be able to do this on the fly here. So I have to bring up my ISO. I'm all the way up at 1,000 right now so that you can see my face. I'm a little blown out over on the side. I have a window over here and a lamp over here. Look in these dark shadowy corners, and over here you might see a lot of noise and just a lot of like fuzziness, and that's what we mean by image quality. If I turn my lights back on, then I'm way blown out, and then I don't remember where my ISO is at. By the way, I put a link down in the description to all of my gear, including the lights that I'm using and the handy switch that I use on my floor to turn them on the fly. So with my lights on and my ISO lower, not only am I lit up, so I should be looking a little better at least, but the shadows and all like the dark spots behind me should be a little less noisy. Right now my ISO is set at 250. Sometimes it might be 300. Sometimes it might even be 400 or 500. Kind of depends what's happening outside of this window. So one thing you want to pay close attention to here, if you're new to this, is your exposure meter. So if you hold that shutter button down halfway, the camera will take a reading and give you a little mark on this scale. Generally, you want it to be in the middle, so you can play with your ISO until you get it in the right spot. So this would be for you if you don't really know what you're looking for in your image. If you're like, I don't know if this is overexposed or underexposed, I don't know what I'm looking at, that meter will help you out there. But to keep it really simple, what you want to do is just look at your whites and your blacks and ask yourself, are my whites white and my blacks black? But you still want to see the detail of them. So look at the shadows. If they're so dark that you can't see the detail, then your ISO might be a little too low. And then you want to look at the whites or the lighter areas. And again, you should be able to see the details of your face. You should be able to see the details of anything that is, that is white, without it being so blown out that you can't really even see the object. So let me just adjust mine for you here. If I go way low, you can hardly see the edge of my arm compared to the shadows, right? So that's way too low. If I go up high, all the way up to, 1250, that's pretty crazy looking. You can't even see where my cheeks and my eyes end. You can't see part of my eyebrow over here. And really the best thing you can do is play around with it, shoot some video at the different ISO settings, and then look at them on your screen and see how they look to you. Don't just rely on what you see in the camera. And that's the best way that you're gonna actually learn what the different settings actually do. Now that we have ISO out of the way, let's go back to aperture. This is often also referred to as the f-stop, if you've heard that before, and this determines your depth of field, and your lens is really what's at play here. So generally with my kit lens here, I keep it at low, like 3.5 or 4. With my lighting and the really small size of my office, that gives me the best sort of set up to have some blur in the background. I don't know if you can read that. Focus on my face and back here is blurry. If I come back here, my auto focus is going to keep me in focus, and then I'm closer to that stuff, so it's not as blurry. And if I come closer, then I'm still in focus and that stuff gets even blurrier. 3.5 is the lowest mine will go. If I had a bigger room and my bookshelves were further back behind me, then they would be even more blurry. So your aperture is another one that you're gonna wanna play with a little bit. If it's just you face on camera, it's pretty straightforward. If you have multiple people or things moving around a lot, or there's a lot that you want to be in focus, then you're going to want to bump that f-stop number up, which means you're going to also have to bring your ISO up a little bit because the amount of light coming in through the lens will be less. So when you're shooting your YouTube videos on your DSLR in manual mode, first thing you want to do is your shutter speed. Set that to double your frame rate, and then observe your space and your lighting and see what does my ISO need to be around here. Maybe make some test videos for yourself, and then figure out what you want your aperture to be based on the depth of field look that you are trying to accomplish with your videos. Now, I promised you a battery hack to save your battery life, but before we get to that, I want to talk about white balance real quick. So you can leave your Canon 70D on auto white balance, and then you can just kind of let the camera figure out what the white balance is supposed to be. A while ago, somebody reached out to me on Instagram, shout out to Michael Kinney, who let me know of a way to actually adjust the white balance. He recommended that I change it based on the color temperature of the light bulbs in my softbox lights. And that's what I've been using. But feel free to keep your Canon in auto white balance mode or play with the color temperature. Look at the actual light bulbs on your softbox lights if you have those, or even your overhead lights. You should have a color temperature there. You can actually set your white balance to match that color temperature and it will just correct for you. Now, the battery hack. You may have noticed on my camera that I have a cord coming out of my Canon 70D here, and this is so that you can just plug the camera into an outlet and not even use a battery. So batteries don't last very long when you're shooting videos, and I got really sick and tired of having dead batteries and actually draining a battery in the middle of a video. So I finally Googled this and I found this $22 power adapter coupler that goes in just like a battery. You can actually close the door and everything, and then your battery will never die again. This thing is brilliant and it's only $22. It's so worth it. So I put a link down in the description below to the exact one that I am using. And if you want the whole walkthrough of my YouTube studio with all of my gear and my whole setup and everything, I've queued that up for you here as well. Hey, if you're creating videos for YouTube and social media to grow your audience, authority, and income online, then I created a free guide that I think you're gonna love. It's called the Social Video Blueprint. You can grab it in the link right here, or I'll put a link down in the description below. On your way out, hit that like button if this video is helpful for you, and don't forget to subscribe too. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.